The night air in Wisconsin carried that particular chill that made folks pull their coats tighter, but inside the Winnebago County Group home, something far colder was unfolding. Staff members rushed through the hallways, their footsteps echoing against linoleum floors as radios crackled with urgent transmissions. Someone was missing. Not just anyone either. Morgan Geyser, one of the most infamous names in true crime history, had vanished into the darkness beyond the facility's walls. Within hours, police cars flooded the quiet streets of the surrounding neighborhood. Helicopters swept overhead, their searchlights cutting through the Wisconsin night like accusing fingers pointing at every shadow. Parents grabbed their children and locked their doors. Social media exploded with alerts and warnings. The nightmare that had begun over a decade ago in a suburban forest wasn't over. It had merely taken a terrifying new shape. But to understand why an entire community held its breath that night, we need to go back, way back, to a time when a young girl's fractured mind collided with an internet legend, and nothing would ever be the same again. Morgan Geyser came into this world on May 16, 2002, in Waukesha, Wisconsin. By all outward appearances, her early childhood seemed unremarkable. She grew up in a middle-class family, attended local schools, and by most accounts, appeared to be just another kid navigating the complexities of growing up in suburban America. But beneath that surface, something deeply troubling was taking root. Those who knew Morgan described her as quiet, often withdrawn, the kind of child who seemed to exist in her own world more often than not. Her father, Matt Geyser, had his own struggles with mental illness, something that would later become significant in understanding his daughter's psychological makeup. The seeds of what was to come were being planted long before anyone recognized the signs. As Morgan entered middle school, her social circle remained small. She found connection difficult, often preferring the company of fictional characters and online communities to the messy reality of adolescent friendships. That's when she met Anissa Weier, a girl who would become her closest companion and ultimately her partner in one of the most shocking crimes in recent American history. The two girls bonded over shared interests, including a growing obsession with an internet entity known as Slender Man. For those unfamiliar, Slender Man originated as a creepypasta creation on the Something Awful forums back in 2009. A user named Eric Knudsen, going by the username Victor Surge, posted photographs he had digitally manipulated to include a tall, thin, faceless figure lurking in the background. The entity wore a dark suit and had elongated limbs that seemed to defy human anatomy. What started as a creative writing exercise quickly evolved into a sprawling mythology. Other users contributed their own stories, artwork, and sightings. Slender Man became a collaborative horror fiction, a monster born from the collective imagination of the internet. He stalked children in forests. He drove people to madness. He demanded devotion from those who wished to become his proxies. For most people who encountered Slender Man content, it was clearly fiction. Unsettling, perhaps, but obviously fake. The problem was that Morgan Geyser's mind didn't process reality the way most minds do. Her grasp on what was real and what was imaginary had already begun to blur dangerously, and Slender Man slipped through those cracks like poison. Morgan didn't just believe Slender Man might be real. She became convinced he was absolutely real. She told Anissa that she had communicated with him, that he lived in a mansion in the Nicolet National Forest, and that he was watching them. In her fractured perception, this fictional character wasn't just a story. He was a presence, a demand, a threat. And Slender Man, according to Morgan, wanted something from them. He wanted proof of their loyalty. He wanted blood. The plan that Morgan and Anissa developed was chilling in its deliberate nature. They would invite their friend Peyton Leutner to a sleepover for Morgan's 12th birthday. They would take her into the woods, and there they would kill her. This sacrifice, they believed, would prove their devotion to Slender Man and earn them a place in his mansion. They would become his proxies, protected and powerful forever. On May 31st, 2014, the plan went into motion. The morning after the birthday sleepover, the three girls headed to David's Park in Waukesha. Morgan had brought a kitchen knife from home, a blade approximately 5 inches long, hidden in her jacket. As they walked deeper into the wooded area of the park, Morgan and Anissa's intentions remained invisible to Peyton, who thought she was simply spending time with her friends. On May 31st, 2014, the plan went into motion. The morning after the birthday sleepover, the three girls headed to David's Park in Waukesha. Morgan had brought a kitchen knife from home, a blade approximately 5 inches long, hidden in her jacket. As they walked deeper into the wooded area of the park, Morgan and Anissa's intentions remained invisible to Peyton, who thought she was simply spending time with her friends. What happened next in those woods would scar everyone involved forever. Anissa told Morgan to do it. Morgan later recounted that she felt as though she had to follow through, that there was no turning back. She attacked Peyton from behind, and what followed was a brutal assault that left the young victim with 19 stab wounds. 19. Some of the wounds missed major arteries by mere millimeters. One came within a hair's width of her heart. After the attack, Morgan and Anissa left Peyton for dead. They simply walked away, heading toward the highway, believing they were now beginning their journey to meet Slender Man at his mansion in the forest. Behind them, Peyton Leutner lay bleeding in the woods, clinging to life with a strength that defied what her attackers had done to her. But Peyton refused to die. With wounds covering her body, she managed to crawl out of the woods and onto a road where a passing cyclist discovered her. The emergency response that followed saved her life, though the physical and psychological scars would remain forever. Doctors and first responders were amazed she had survived at all. Meanwhile, Morgan and Anissa were picked up by police on Interstate 94, walking toward the Nicollet National Forest. When officers searched Morgan, they found the bloody knife still in her possession. The interrogations that followed would provide a disturbing window into the mind of a child who had lost her grip on reality. When police questioned Morgan about the attack, her responses were matter-of-fact, almost emotionless. She explained Slender Man's requirements clearly, as though discussing homework assignments rather than attempted murder. Detectives struggled to process what they were hearing. This wasn't a child showing remorse or horror at her actions. This was a child who seemed genuinely confused about why adults didn't understand that Slender Man was real and that his demands had to be obeyed. The case exploded across national and international media. The collision of internet culture, childhood innocence, and savage violence created a story that seemed almost too disturbing to be real. Parents everywhere suddenly looked at their children's online activities with new terror. What were their kids reading, watching, believing? The legal proceedings that followed were complex and fraught with questions about mental competency, juvenile justice, and the intersection of fantasy and reality. Both Morgan and Anissa were charged with first-degree intentional homicide, which in Wisconsin could theoretically lead to 65 years in prison. They were initially charged as adults, a decision that sparked intense debate about how the justice system should handle children who commit horrific crimes. The psychological evaluations of Morgan Geyser revealed what many suspected. She was suffering from early-onset schizophrenia, a rare and devastating condition that had been warping her perception of reality long before the attack. She experienced hallucinations, delusions, and an inability to consistently distinguish between what was real and what existed only in her mind. One evaluator described speaking with Morgan and realizing that, to her, characters like Slender Man and others weren't fictional. They occupied the same space of reality as her parents, her classmates, and the evaluators themselves. Her mind had constructed a world where the impossible was possible, where internet legends walked among us, demanding sacrifice. Given these findings, Morgan's legal team pursued a plea based on mental illness. In December 2017, a judge ruled that Morgan would not go to prison. Instead, she was sentenced to 40 years at a state mental health facility where she would receive treatment for her schizophrenia and be monitored for public safety. The emphasis was on treatment rather than punishment, a decision that drew both support and criticism. Peyton Leutner's parents expressed complicated feelings about the outcome. Their daughter had survived but would carry the trauma forever. No amount of treatment for Morgan could undo what had been done. At the same time, they recognized that sending a mentally ill child to prison, rather than a treatment facility, raised its own moral questions. Morgan Geyser entered the Winnebago Mental Health Institute in 2018, beginning a journey of psychiatric treatment, medication management, and intensive therapy designed to address her severe mental illness. The facility provided a structured environment where she could receive care while remaining separated from the general public. Reports from inside the facility over the years painted a picture of gradual progress. Morgan was medicated for her schizophrenia, and by most accounts, the treatment helped stabilize her condition significantly. She no longer reported seeing or communicating with Slender Man. She began to show insight into her illness, understanding that the delusions that had driven her to violence were symptoms of a sick mind rather than actual reality. Staff members who worked with her over the years noted changes in her demeanor. The flat affect that had characterized her early interviews gave way to something more like normal emotional expression. She expressed remorse for what she had done to Peyton, something that had been largely absent in the immediate aftermath of the attack. She engaged with therapy and seemed genuinely committed to getting better. These improvements eventually led to discussions about transitioning Morgan to a less restrictive setting. The mental health system operates on a philosophy of least restrictive care, meaning that patients who demonstrate stability and reduced risk should theoretically move to environments that allow more freedom while still providing supervision. For Morgan, this meant the possibility of leaving the locked psychiatric hospital for a group home. The community had mixed reactions to the idea. Some believed that if psychiatric professionals determined Morgan was stable enough for a group home, the system should be trusted. Others argued that someone who had committed such a brutal act should never be allowed any level of freedom, regardless of their mental health status. The debate was intense, emotional, and deeply personal for many Waukesha residents who still remembered the fear of 2014. In the years leading up to her transition, Morgan's case came before the courts multiple times for review. Each hearing examined her progress, her medication compliance, and assessments of her current risk level. Psychiatric experts testified about her condition, her treatment response, and their professional opinions about her prognosis. Eventually, the decision was made. Morgan Geyser would be moved to a group home, a residential facility with staff supervision, but significantly more freedom than the psychiatric hospital. She would be able to move about more freely, have more control over her daily activities, and begin the long process of reintegrating into something resembling normal life. The transition happened with little public fanfare. Authorities were understandably cautious about publicizing details that might draw attention or create security concerns. Morgan settled into the group home routine, attending therapy sessions, taking her medications, and living under the watchful eyes of staff members trained to work with individuals like her. But group homes aren't prisons. They aren't even locked psychiatric facilities. They operate on a model of trust and supervision rather than physical containment. Doors may be secured at certain hours, but the level of restriction is fundamentally different from a hospital setting. This model works for many individuals transitioning back into the community after mental health treatment. For some, however, it creates opportunities. In the weeks before the escape, those close to Morgan's case noted subtle changes. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger immediate intervention, but looking back, the signs were there. She had become more withdrawn again, less engaged with group activities and therapy sessions. Staff documented these observations, but didn't consider them severe enough to warrant moving her back to a higher security setting. Morgan had also been involved in recent court proceedings regarding her continued supervision. These hearings were routine, part of the ongoing legal framework governing her case, but they may have contributed to her state of mind. The uncertainty of her future, the constant evaluation, and the weight of being forever identified with one of the most notorious crimes of her generation, all pressed down on her. No one can say for certain what was going through Morgan's mind in those final days before she fled. Perhaps her medication compliance had slipped, allowing old delusions to creep back in. Perhaps she simply couldn't bear the confines of her existence any longer. Perhaps something else entirely drove her to make the decision that would once again thrust her name into headlines. What we know is this. On that Wisconsin evening, Morgan Geyser found an opportunity, and she took it. The details of exactly how she escaped remain somewhat unclear from public sources, but group homes typically have procedures for accounting for residents. Staff conduct regular checks, doors are secured during overnight hours, and supervision is maintained throughout the day. Yet despite these measures, Morgan managed to slip away unnoticed. The delay between her departure and the discovery that she was missing would later become a point of intense scrutiny. How much time passed before staff realized one of the most high-profile individuals in their care was gone? Minutes. Hours. Every moment of that gap represented opportunity for something terrible to happen. When the alarm was finally raised, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Local police were notified within minutes. Given who Morgan Geyser was and what she had done, this wasn't treated as a routine missing persons case. This was treated as a potential public safety emergency of the highest order. Officers flooded the area around the group home. Checkpoints were established on major roads. A helicopter was deployed to conduct aerial searches. The descriptions went out on radio and social media. 22-year-old white female, approximately 5 feet 4 inches, specific physical characteristics that we won't detail here for safety reasons. The community response was predictable and visceral. Parents pulled their children inside. Businesses in the area went on alert. Social media platforms lit up with posts sharing the news, many accompanied by old photographs from Morgan's trial and expressions of fear about what might happen. The commentary online was fierce and divided. Some people demanded to know how this could have happened. How could someone with Morgan's history be in a setting where escape was even possible? Others questioned the entire mental health approach to her case, arguing that she should have remained in a locked facility forever, regardless of her treatment progress. Meanwhile, the search continued through the night. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, checked known locations, and followed up on tips that flooded in from concerned citizens. Some of those tips were legitimate attempts to help. Others were false alarms or attention-seeking fabrications. Each one had to be investigated, consuming precious time and resources. The hours stretched on, and the tension mounted. Where was Morgan Geyser? What was she doing? Had she contacted anyone? Did she have a plan, or was this an impulsive flight born of desperation? And most importantly, was anyone in danger? For the Leutner family, who had spent years trying to heal from the trauma Morgan had inflicted, the news must have been devastating. The person who had nearly killed their daughter was out there somewhere, unmonitored and uncontained. All the progress, all the therapy, all the attempts to move forward as a family were suddenly thrown into chaos by the knowledge that Morgan was free. Authorities worked the case aggressively, coordinating between multiple agencies and maintaining constant communication about the search. The pressure to locate Morgan quickly was immense, not just because of public safety concerns, but because of the symbolic weight of the case. If Morgan Geyser could escape and remain at large, what did that say about the system's ability to handle dangerous individuals? The break in the case came relatively quickly, though every hour she remained missing felt like an eternity to those searching for her. The exact circumstances of how authorities located Morgan haven't been fully detailed in public accounts, but what we know is that she was found within a day of her escape. When officers approached Morgan, she didn't resist. Whatever had driven her to flee, whatever she had hoped to accomplish by leaving, seemed to have dissipated by the time they found her. She was taken into custody without incident, though the questions about what this escape meant for her future were just beginning. In the immediate aftermath of her recapture, authorities released statements confirming that Morgan had been located and was in custody. They provided few details about the escape or the search, citing ongoing evaluation of the incident. What they did make clear was that Morgan's status would be reviewed and that appropriate measures would be taken. The legal implications of the escape were significant. While Morgan hadn't harmed anyone during her time outside the group home, the very fact that she had fled represented a violation of the conditions of her placement. Courts would need to determine whether she should be returned to a more secure setting, whether additional charges were appropriate, and how this incident should. Mental health professionals weighed in on what the escape might mean about Morgan's condition. Some suggested that the desire to flee could indicate underlying issues with her treatment, perhaps medication noncompliance or the emergence of new symptoms. Others argued that the impulse to escape supervision was understandable for anyone in her situation and didn't necessarily indicate a deterioration of her mental state. The debate about how the system had failed to prevent this escape grew louder. Critics pointed out that group homes, by their nature, aren't designed to contain individuals who are determined to leave. If someone like Morgan Geyser posed enough of a risk that her escape warranted a massive police response, why was she in a group home at all? Defenders of the mental health approach argued that treatment requires a gradual return of freedoms, and that most individuals in group homes never attempt to escape. The system was designed for the majority, they contended, and the actions of one individual shouldn't invalidate an entire approach to mental health care. Comparisons were drawn to other cases where psychiatric patients had escaped supervision with tragic results. Each example added fuel to the argument that security measures needed to be tightened across the board. But others pointed out that treating all psychiatric patients like maximum security prisoners would undermine the very principles of mental health treatment. For Peyton Leutner, now an adult living with the permanent physical and emotional scars of that day in the woods, the escape must have reopened wounds that had never fully healed. She had shown remarkable resilience in the years since the attack, eventually speaking publicly about her experience and her complicated feelings about Morgan and the case. But no amount of healing could make the news of Morgan's escape anything other than traumatic. Public comments attributed to the Leutner family expressed frustration with the system that had allowed this to happen. They had trusted that Morgan would be properly supervised, that the precautions in place would prevent exactly this scenario. That trust had been violated, and the fear that accompanied Morgan's time at large would linger long after she was recaptured. The question of what happens next for Morgan Geyser remains partially unanswered as her case continues to evolve. What seems certain is that she will face consequences for her escape, whether in the form of a return to more secure psychiatric confinement or additional legal proceedings. The relatively relaxed setting of the group home is almost certainly off the table for the foreseeable future. Beyond the immediate legal and logistical questions, the escape raises deeper issues about how society handles individuals like Morgan. She committed a horrific act as a child, driven by a mental illness she couldn't control or even fully understand at the time. She has spent years in treatment, reportedly making significant progress. And yet, the moment she demonstrated that she couldn't be trusted, the public reaction made clear that forgiveness and second chances have limits. There's no easy answer to the question of what Morgan Geyser deserves or what she should face. Those who emphasize mental health point to her illness, her youth at the time of the attack, and her apparent progress in treatment. Those who emphasize public safety point to the severity of her crime, the trauma inflicted on Peyton and her family, and the unacceptable risk represented by her escape. The Slender Man case changed many things. It changed how parents think about their children's internet activity. It changed how experts understand the intersection of online content and vulnerable young minds. It changed how the legal system approaches cases involving severe mental illness in juvenile offenders. And it permanently changed the lives of everyone directly involved. Now, with Morgan's escape and recapture adding another chapter to this ongoing story, we're reminded that the Slender Man case isn't history. It's still unfolding. The decisions made about Morgan's future will set precedents that affect how similar cases are handled for years to come. The debates sparked by her escape will continue to shape public policy around mental health, juvenile justice, and public safety. As Morgan Geyser faces whatever comes next in her journey through the mental health and legal systems, the rest of us are left to grapple with questions that have no satisfying answers. How do we balance compassion for the mentally ill with protection for the public? How do we give second chances while honoring the victims who can never fully recover? How do we prevent the next tragedy while treating those who have already caused harm with basic human dignity? The shadow of Slender Man, that digital phantom born from internet forums and collective creativity, continues to loom over everyone connected to this case. An entity that never existed managed to inspire very real violence, and the ripples from that violence continue to spread outward, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. For Peyton Leutner, courage and survival define her story far more than victimhood. She has rebuilt her life, found her voice, and refused to be defined solely by the worst thing that ever happened to her. That resilience is remarkable and worthy of recognition amidst all the attention paid to her attacker. For the mental health professionals who have worked with Morgan over the years, the escape represents a setback, but perhaps not a complete negation of the progress she has made. Treatment for severe mental illness is rarely linear. There are breakthroughs and setbacks, good periods and difficult ones. The challenge is maintaining treatment and safety even when patients struggle. For law enforcement and the officials responsible for supervising individuals like Morgan, the escape is a wake-up call. Procedures will be reviewed, protocols will be tightened, someone will be held accountable for whatever failures allowed this to happen, and hopefully lessons learned will prevent similar incidents in the future. And for the public, Morgan Geyser's escape serves as a reminder that the comfortable distance we sometimes feel from true crime stories is an illusion. These aren't just headlines or documentary subjects. They're real people living real lives that occasionally intersect with our own in frightening ways. The story of Morgan Geyser isn't over, as she awaits whatever legal and psychiatric proceedings come next, as experts debate what her case means for broader policy questions, and as the public continues to follow the twists and turns of this decades-long saga. We're all witnesses to something that has no clear resolution. What we can say with certainty is that one internet myth, born from a creative writing forum and spread through the collective imagination of millions, continues to haunt real lives in ways its creators never intended. The Slender Man was never real, but the consequences of people believing in him are all too real for those who continue to live with them every day. This case teaches us something profound about the human mind and its vulnerabilities. It shows us how easily reality can fracture for those struggling with severe mental illness, and how desperately we need systems that can protect both the public and those whose illnesses lead them to harm others. It reminds us that children can be victims of their own minds, even as they victimize others. Morgan Geyser will spend the rest of her life grappling with what she did in those woods when she was 12 years old. Whether in a group home, a locked facility, or eventually some form of supervised community living, the weight of that day will never fully leave her, and Peyton Leutner will spend the rest of her life carrying the scars, visible and invisible, of what was done to her by someone she trusted. The escape and recapture of Morgan Geyser adds another layer to this tragedy, another reminder that the path toward anything resembling resolution is long and uncertain. But it also provides an opportunity for reflection, for examination of the systems meant to handle cases like hers, and perhaps for changes that will better serve everyone involved in similar situations in the future. If you found this video informative and want to stay updated on developments in this case and others like it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. Drop a comment below letting us know your thoughts on this case. Should Morgan have been in a higher security facility from the start? What do you think should happen next? Your perspectives matter, and this community is all about engaging with these difficult questions together. For those watching, if this story moved you, informed you, or opened your eyes to how complex these cases truly are, make sure you like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more deep, carefully researched true crime storytelling that respects the truth while exploring the human side of these tragedies. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and remember that the stories we follow aren't just entertainment. They're windows into the complexities of the human experience, and they deserve our thoughtful attention.